What's the most interesting psychology fact you know? Story 1. Borderline personality disorder was named to describe patients who seemed on the borderline of psychosis. These patients were so distorted in their perceptions of interpersonal relationships that psychosis could not be ruled out. But the distorted perceptions did not seem to present in other contexts, so they didn't seem to fit the criteria for psychosis either. Story 2. Neuroplasticity. How the brain can change as a result of trauma and that we can work to heal trauma and rewire the brain. The brain is a pattern, making and recognition machine. That's how we learn. In trauma, the brain has created very strong patterns that give false alarms in safe circumstances. The amygdala fires and stress hormones are released even while asleep, causing someone to wake up with a lot of inexplicable energy and not being able to sleep or fall asleep. That sleep disturbance and deprivation is awful because cognition is lower. A relationship with a therapist or anybody who is always calm and predictable will, over time, help the brain to recognize that it is safe even if it is feeling unsafe and begin to rewire its reactions to be appropriate to the situation. It will eventually allow the person to have access to their frontal lobes so they can think through planning and how to act and react rather than acting automatically on emotion. Everyone knows what the latter feels like. It's like when you're so angry or sad or afraid that you act in ways you might regret later. Being traumatized means that is happening in response to triggers that would not send a healthy person into fight or flight or shutdown. But there can be other brain changes like an enlarged hypothalamus. Story 3. Placebo and nocebo effects have always been so fascinating to me. And it is not just psychosomatic, but there are real physiological implications of placebo. Example. It can change patterns of activation in the brain and upregulate endogenous opioid, body natural painkiller. I guess it can be extended to other areas of life, such as manifest. On the other hand, nocebo is when your brain convinces your body that harmless things are harmful, triggering negative effects simply because you expect them to happen, like thinking you're under a curse. Story 4. The brain hallucinates reality into being. The brain is a prediction engine. It's not energy efficient to actually process all the information coming into it, and it's beneficial to anticipate what will happen next. So if you're looking at something and it appears as you would expect, you don't update your internal model of the world. This could explain the invisible gorilla experiment. For more, Lisa Feldman Barrett writes and talks a lot on this topic. It makes sense too, as it is far more efficient. Our brains do amazing pattern recognition using many senses. We essentially put together a picture or concept of an object, using sometimes very limited information. As a kid, I could identify a Volkswagen Beetle by sound or just a small flash of part of the car. I'd imagine my brain fills in the rest. Knowing that, tricking the brain in certain situations would be easy. Story 5. Here are a few for you. Fact 1. While asleep, the brain recalls memories in reverse order. Not the entire time when you're asleep, and not just while you're asleep. It may have something to do with memory consolidation. Fact, theory. 2. Scientists hypothesize that the brain operates near a phase transition, such as between solid and liquid. During such a transition, matter is neither ordered or disordered and somehow in between. That is, solids are ordered, liquids are random. At the critical point between phases, molecules can seamlessly move between solid and liquid, and islands of arbitrary size can form. The implication being that a molecule changing state can influence other molecules at arbitrarily large, theoretically infinite distances away. Within the brain, it may have something to do with efficiency of information transfer across long distances. This is called the critical brain hypothesis. It's a controversial theory, but a fascinating one. Story 6. The way memory works is really interesting to me. We think of it as a camera, but it's not at all. We save the essential details, the skeleton, and every time we remember it, flesh it out based on those details. So you're not really remembering something, you're constructing it. And the more you recount or think about a memory, the more likely it is to be distorted. Story 7. There isn't a single case of a blind person developing schizophrenia. While there's no conclusive scientific evidence that suggests a direct link between blindness and the absence of schizophrenia, there have been some interesting theories proposed. One theory suggests that the absence of visual stimuli may alter the development of certain brain regions associated with schizophrenia, thus reducing the risk of developing the disorder. However, it's important to note that schizophrenia is a complex disorder with multiple factors at play, including genetics, environment, and brain chemistry. The absence of blindness-related schizophrenia cases could simply be a statistical anomaly or a result of underreporting. Story 8. Hebb's rule, neurons that fire together, wire together, is so fascinating to me when you think about it. Example, if you always associate A negatively to B, then those neurons will always fire together. So if you associate a certain place with a bad memory, you'll always see that and not enjoy the place. If you were to just switch your brain and start associating A with positivity, those neurons rewire. It's hard to explain, but once you learn it, it's not hard to apply to different parts of life and behavior. Story 9. The Mandela effect is fascinating. It's the phenomenon where a large group of people remember an event or detail differently from how it actually occurred. It raises questions about memory, perception, and the malleability of our recollections. What's even more intriguing is the psychological mechanisms behind why we collectively misremember certain things. It's a mind-bending dive into the complexities of human cognition. Story 10. You pay more visual attention to things between heartbeats. The implication being that your brain is preoccupied talking to your heart and pays less attention to visual stimulus during the heartbeat itself. Microsaccades are coupled to heartbeat abstract. During visual fixation, the eye generates microsaccades and slower components of fixational eye movement that are part of the visual processing strategy in humans. Here, we show that ongoing heartbeat is coupled to temporal rate variations in the generation of microsaccades. Using registration of eye recording and ECG in humans, we tested the hypothesis that microsaccade onsets are coupled to the relative phase of the RR intervals in heartbeat. We observed significantly more microsaccades during the early phase after the R peak in the ECG. This form of coupling between heartbeat and eye movements was substantiated by the additional finding of a coupling between heart phase and motion activity in slow fixational eye movement, that is, retinal image slip caused by physiological drift. Our findings therefore demonstrate a coupling of the oculomotor system and ongoing heartbeat, which provides further evidence for bodily influences on visuomotor functioning. Significance statement. In the present study, we show that microsaccades are coupled to heartbeat. Moreover, we revealed a strong modulation of slow eye movement around the R peak in the ECG. These results suggest that heartbeat as a basic physiological signal is related to statistical modulations of fixational eye movement, in particular, the generation of microsaccades. Therefore, our findings add a new perspective on the principles underlying the generation of fixational eye movement. Importantly, our study highlights the need to record eye movements when studying the influence of heartbeat in neuroscience to avoid misinterpretation of eye movement-related artifacts as heart-evoked modulations of neural process. Story 11. This seems strange. The unconscious just deals with mental processes which take place outside our awareness. It feels almost intuitive that this would occur and that we aren't 100% aware of all these processes ever. But we are aware that processes do happen even if we aren't looking. Phobias still exist, for example, when we aren't thinking about them, and gut feelings often rely on feelings that aren't within the immediate, active, conscious thoughts. Biases can affect us from the areas beyond our awareness, too, and our decision-making ability does not solely rely on our reasoning or logic or emotionality in that moment. To me, it sort of proves itself. Story 12. Pica is the name for the disorder that causes people to consume weird items like glass, chalk, laundry detergent, and everything else covered on my strange addiction. I had it bad when I was pregnant with my second child. Suddenly, I was chewing ice constant, specifically covering the bottom of the ice tray with a thin layer of water and letting it freeze and then eating it. Thin layer somehow tasted better or cleaner than a big cube. Then I really liked the smell of Gain laundry detergent, so I started smelling the detergent while eating the ice. It was my way of eating the detergent without actually eating it. I had to really convince myself that it would not taste the way it smells to prevent myself from trying it. Only time I've ever had it, and it went away suddenly right after birth. So in hindsight, it probably wasn't really bad, since I never did eat the detergent or powdery things to peeling. But the urge was pretty strong. Story 13. In the 1960s, a treatment for epilepsy was cutting the corpus callosum, the bridge between left and hemisphere. They could then ask each hemisphere different questions by showing signs to one eye or maybe sending an audio signal to one ear. Half the brain could describe an apple, red, round, etc., but couldn't name it. The other half could name it, but not describe it. They would ask half the brain to get up and walk around, then ask the other half why they got up, and they always made up a plausible excuse. I was thirsty, I felt like stretching my legs, etc. Alien hand syndrome, aka Dr. Strangelove syndrome, would develop in some where, if you were, say, doing the dishes, if you watched both hands, it would be just fine. But if you stopped paying attention, if memory serves typically, left hand would grab a knife and try to kill you or perform other self-sabotaging acts. I got this from a Time Life book my parents owned, though Amazon reviews today say some of the claims in the book have been discredited, but I have no ideas which ones. Story 14. If you are emotionally upset, like you're about to walk into a funeral wake, visit a very sick friend in the hospital, about to go into court on some sensitive issue, and you want to calm down to gain control, all you got to do is this. Have somebody ask you a bunch of questions or numbers are the answers. Like, what's your phone number? What's your social security number? What's today's date, your birthday, and your mother's birthday? Turns out, being emotionally upset and accessing numbers existing to completely separate parts of your brain. You can't do both at the same time. Once you start reciting the numbers, the emotional upset will dissipate. Story 15. Mental athlete who memorize thousands of digits to win competitions. Do it by mentally turning the numbers into images and telling themselves a story using. I kind of do this with. I associate letters and numbers with colors and therefore words, and such as color code, depending on what they start with. I have no idea how this helps me or what it does, but it makes it easier to remember something. If I am trying to pull something from my memory, the color it is coded with usually pops into my head first, and then the info. Story 16. The frequency. Illusion Bader-Meinhof phenomenon. The frequency illusion is when you start noticing something for the first time, and suddenly it appears that this something suddenly crops up everywhere. In reality, this is not true. A good example is a not currently trending word you heard for the first time. Suddenly you read and hear this word all the time. You mean, once you've bought the car, you only start noticing how many of them drive around in your area. Reminds me of my driver's license test. It had a question that was something like, if you drive a red car, are you more likely to come across red cars in traffic? OFC, I answered false because it made no sense. The right answer was true because of its phenomenon. I still think I was right though. Story 17. There are actually blood vessels obstructing light from reaching certain areas in your eye, effectively creating a shadow. Your brain filters this out and essentially fills in the gaps, so you don't actually see this spider web-like network of black lines. However, you can visualize them by shining a light at a diagonal into your eye, not directly, and gently wiggling it about. This means your brain doesn't have enough time to filter it out, and you see the spider web-like network of blood vessels. Edit. Wow. Waking up to so many people enjoying this neat little trick will put some pep in my step. Thanks for the awards, kind strangers. Also, a bit more detailed instructions to clarify the actions involved. I find it easier to see this effect in a dark environment, so the contrast of the black shadow against the light is higher. You want to be staring straight ahead and shining the light into your pupil at a 45-degree angle from the side, directed at your nose. Phone lights will do great. Then, wiggle the light in gentle 1 centimeter movement, side to side. Keep this up for about a second at least, and you should see them. Hope this clears it up a bit. Story 18. I don't recall the scientific term with any certainty, but doorways. Basically, you think of one thing, then walk through a doorway and it's gone, filed away into matters relevant to the room you just left. This is why you often forget why you just walked into the kitchen. In the world of restaurants, this is called the walk-in of forgetful. When you go to the walk-in fridge for something you need, open the door, and immediately forget why you went to the walk-in. So you return to your station, and 5 minutes later, remember what you needed. So you go to the walk-in to get it. Depending how baked you are at work, this cycle can repeat itself a few times pretty easily. Story 19. Confronting someone with information that is at odds with what their brain is used to stimulates the amygdala in the same way a physical attack does. So, telling some old person that what they think the world is like is essentially wrong can be compared to a slap in the face. This can be small things as well. I tried to explain to my father once that people are making money off of YouTube as content creators, and that idea was so outlandish to him that he got angry and loud. My girlfriend at the time was really confused and scared afterward. We ran into this while taking care of my grandmother once dementia had set in. She kept asking where various family members. Originally, my mother would remind her that person had been dead X years. My grandmother would get angry she wasn't told prior and would grieve all over again. I was in high school, and after watching it enough times, I would say, they were over on whatever street the cemetery they were buried in was on. She'd handle it better if she knew where they were, not why they were there. Was able to get other family members to follow suit. Daily visits became less stressful for everyone involved. Story 20. When asking for something big, lead up to it by asking for something inconsequential at first, so the person is likely to say yes, followed by slightly larger requests. Once a person has said yes, They feel obligated to keep saying yes. Salespeople do this a lot. On the other hand, if you want something small, start by asking for something ridiculous. So, by comparison, the small thing seems trivial. Salespeople do this a lot too. Also, people are more inclined to let you do something if you give a reason. The interesting part is that it doesn't really matter what the reason is. Example, asking to cut in front of someone at the checkout. If you ask, "Do you mind if I cut in front of you? I just need to buy these things," will be more effective than just saying, "Do you mind if I cut in front of you?" even though the reason is irrelevant. Everyone is in line because they need to buy things. Brains are weird. For more social psychology facts, subscribe below. Just kidding. Buy a textbook. I'm not a bot. Story 21. I'm not sure how true this is, but a woman was diagnosed through voices she had heard telling her exactly where to go and where the tumor was. If anything, it's a good read. It was once described to me that the feeling of being one with the universe that a person experiences on psilocybin mushrooms is that there is a tremendous amount of involuntary biological activity happening. It regulates your blood pH, CO2 concentration, respiration, and other stuff. The psilocybin peels that curtain back, and you become hyper aware of these types of processes where you usually aren't. I wonder if there is a similar mechanism at play, some kind of misfiring leading an awareness of something ain't right to be manifested as imaginary voices, like people with synesthesia and the like. Story 22. Tachypsychia. Essentially, under situations of extreme stress, your mind starts processing information at such a high rate of speed that time seems to slow down in your perception. Victims of car crashes experience it. I experienced it during my first firefight in Afghanistan. It was like the entire world was in slow motion. Famously, you saw Tom Hanks' character, Captain Miller, in Saving Private Ryan, experience it during the Normandy landing sequence. I've experienced. When I was in high school, I was driving with some friends of mine during the winter months, and our car slid into a tree. Right before we hit the tree, I distinctly remember time seeming to slow down as we plowed through the tree. It was a small tree. The whole thing took about 3 seconds, but it felt like 30 seconds to me. I remember the moment right before we hit the tree and the moment right after when I was running away. The friend wasn't supposed to be driving people yet because we were only 16. I didn't realize this was an actual thing. Story 23. People are much more likely to comply with a request when the word because makes an appearance. This applies even if the reason given is just an empty statement. For example, imagine you go to a shopping mall and there is someone sitting on a bench in the walkway. There is plenty of other available seating around. You approach them and ask, "Can I sit there?" At this point, only a tiny percentage would agree to get up. Now, let's change what you say so that you grip your back and say, "Can I sit there? Because I've suddenly got a terrible shooting pain in my back." Now, a majority will actually comply. Here's the shocking part. We introduce a third strategy where you say, "Can I sit there? Because I really need to sit." Studies show the majority will still comply, even when the reason is just a nothing statement. Story 24. Fact 1. It's common for victims of violent crimes to forget key details, even if they saw everything, because their brain is focusing more on how to survive than how to identify the perp. It's rare for prosecutors to have a victim who remembers everything about the perp or the place, which makes the trial difficult because we often assume that victims will remember all the key details. In fact, they're more likely to remember minor details like smells and sounds. Fact 2, if you keep the first and last letter in every word in the same spot but rearrange the middle letter, your brain can automatically figure out the words. Story 25. All our memories have, while not a timestamp, a vague chronological order. Without having a date or time to include in the memory, we still know that something happened approximate distance in the past, or just a moment ago, or in a particular order. The problem is, very occasionally, a memory is missing that chronology, and so we have no idea when it happened. This is the most likely and common reason for déjà vu. We see something, it immediately falls into a vague, "it happened at some point" timeline. Because we only know it happened sometime in the past, we think that it is a separate event from the one that is currently happening. So we think it has happened twice. Story 26. Eye doctor. The average human blink has an interval somewhere between 4 to 6 seconds. But when we read, look at a phone or tablet or computer for extended hours, the blink interval can reduce to once or twice per minute, and it is damaging to the eyes due to the requirement of spreading tears, but also because the glands are not being milked by blinking, and therefore forcing backup of materials, and even in severe cases, death of the glands entirely. These glands are responsible for protection and comfort of the eye, and when left to die, your tears simply cannot protect the eye well enough. Story 27. I frequently bring up this amazing thing that our brain can do called pareidolia. It's the ability to see patterns in something where there are no patterns. Our brain will literally fill in blanks and make up information for two things to connect to one commonality. The reason that it happens is because of how we organize memories. Every piece of information has to be connected to another piece of information in order for us to recall it. But if a piece of information doesn't connect to anything, our brains can make something up in order to bridge the gap. As a consequence, people can see meaning in things that literally have no meaning and connect dots where there are none. Story 28. Tolerance, value systems, and association. Your brain has a tendency to adjust to certain things. People call this getting used to it or getting comfortable. The reality is desensitization. A good chunk of the time, people will think something is normal just because of frequent experience or association with something they are familiar with. In reality, it's not that common and can be very wrong. It's actually used to lull people into complacency by easing them into scenarios by habit or routine rather than slow progression. Because the brain uses association for memory or reason, people have a tendency to accommodate things they are familiar with. So the familiarity is used to cause later association. This chain can continue, even though the entire chain of synaptic connections can all be false and take forever to untangle and break down. It's what people mean by being caught in someone's web. The neural network of the brain being manipulated in this way is the reason for a lot of disorders and their difficulty in recovery, especially due to bias or the Pygmalion effect. Hari's window is cool too, but I like the dynamic of decision making between acting and thinking. Story 29. The bystander effect. If you call out for help in a crowded street, it's very likely no one will help you. Usually they think that someone else will help you, or it's a movie or TV show being filmed, or something similar. If you ever have an emergency or are responding to one, always point your finger at someone and ask for their help, or tell them to do something. For example, someone is having a heart attack in the street. You have first aid training and no CPR. You check for pulse, and there is none. So you start to do chest compressions. You need to call the ambulance. And if you just say, someone call 911, or someone call an ambulance, and there are a lot of people around, it's quite likely you'd get ignored. So you point at someone and tell them to do it. That way you basically guilt them into doing it. Story 30. When you see an image or video of someone sustaining an injury, example, breaking an arm, regions of your brain which are related to pain in that area are stimulated. There have been studies which have shown that our brains begin the mental processes for an action before we have consciously decided to do it. It's a part of an ongoing debate in psychology about our free will. Yelling when injured is an involuntary, evolutionary response designed to alert others to your state and summon aid. The James Lange theory states that we first experience physiological changes and then feel the appropriate emotion. For example, your heart rate increases, your muscles tense. Then you begin to feel fear, not the other way around. Finally, Bowlby's evolutionary theory states that our attitudes towards our own self-worth, internal working, are almost entirely related to the frequency with which we had our needs as an infant and toddler met by our caregiver. Further studies, example Hazan and Shaver Love Quiz, showed that our attachment styles, Ainsworth's attachment theory, during our time as infants and children, influence our attitudes towards romantic relations.